Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mahmoud Aziz, and I am the director of the Center of Middle East Studies.
Mahmoud, you need to stand in front of the screen because the camera. So people are watching you there.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Mahmoud Aziz, and I am the director for the Center for Middle East Studies. I see that we have quite a good number of new faces. So the Center for Middle Eastern Studies is the Title 6 that's funded by the Department of Education. And our program is basically to integrate Middle East studies into the university and the community at large. As some of you may know, we already focus on three major activities. The first is the FLAS, that's the Foreign Language and Area Studies, where undergraduate students find opportunities to study a Middle Eastern language. And the second is the venue we are in now, which is the Colloquium series, where we invite a good number of scholars to share their work and also to talk about research that they have recently conducted. The third is the outreach program, which is collaborations with the K-12, the school system in Tucson, and also in some of the neighboring states around us. So I would like to welcome all of you again to the Colloquium series this afternoon. And before I turn it to Dr. Julie Allison, the CMES Associate Director, who will introduce Professor Kamran Talattof, I would like to draw your attention to three major events that are lined up for the next month. On September 5 and September 6, we will have the annual CMES book sale. If you are interested in getting a good collection of books about different disciplines, please join us on these 2 days from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. in this room, Marshall 490. And as I said, books will be on so many subjects at great prices. On September the 20th at 3 p.m., the next colloquium talk will be titled Iranian Topics and the Collective Joy, Mobilizing the Everyday Affects. It will be given by Dr. Nahid Syed Most, who is an assistant professor at UT Austin in the Media and Middle East Studies Department. The event will be via Zoom to accommodate more audience, and the link will be available on the CMES website very soon. The third event for the same month will be on September 27th at 3 p.m., where our great professor, Emeritus of Middle East and North African Studies, Charles Smith, will give a colloquium talk titled A Short History of the Palestinian-Israeli Conflict. The event will be also via Zoom to accommodate for a good number of audience from different circles. Now I will turn it over to Dr. Julie Allison, who will introduce Dr. Kamran Talattof. Thank you.
Welcome today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Julie. It's a pleasure to be the Associate Director for the Center for Middle Eastern Studies. Today, it's an honor and a privilege to introduce Professor Kamran Talattof, who is my dissertation advisor, not that long ago, at least in my mind. Dr. Talattof is an ultra-marathon runner in the physical sense and in the metaphorical one, regarding his academic contributions to Middle East studies and more specifically, Iranian studies. He has published and taught classes on a variety of topics, including but not limited to Persian language, literature, Middle Eastern women's lit, Iranian cinema, and social movements. I particularly liked when he made one class jog beside him to keep him awake one time. So, Dr. Talattof accomplished bringing in a grant from the Roshan Cultural Heritage Program, and with that grant, he has served as the founding director of the Roshan Graduate Interdisciplinary Program in Persian and Iranian Studies for the last 8 years. In addition to his running, writing, and family, he is currently working on the academic program review for the Roshan GIDP in Persian and Iranian Studies. He remains constantly busy, and he tires me out, so, I am very impressed. His talk today is a belated book talk to recognize his recent publications. I really am sorry, as we at CMES try to recognize the contributions of our CMES faculty affiliates in a timely manner, And the acting director had reminded me kindly about this talk. So we really appreciate our faculty affiliates, which reminds me, if you have a recent publication, grad students, faculty, let us know. Because in addition to putting it in our reporting, we try to share that information on social media for you to make as many connections in your fields as possible. So stay in touch, we like to raise awareness. Now, in 2022, Professor Talattof published Nezami Ganjavi in Classical Persian Literature, Demystifying the Mystic with Palgrave Macmillan. In 2023, he published 2 books with Routledge, not 1, but 2. Routledge Handbook of Ancient, Classical, and Late Classical Persian Lit, and then Routledge Handbook of Post-Classical and Contemporary Persian Lit. So, one of the chapters from his 2022 publication on Nezami Ganjavi, In Search of Religion and Dantean Moments in the Story of Mahan, won a very prestigious award in the field of Persian literature, the Jafar and Shapro Ferzaneh Prize for Best Article on Persian Lit for 2024. Congratulations. This chapter and the talk he is giving today will inform us of the allegorical nature of Nezami. Today's talk is entitled Medieval Masters of Metaphor and Allegory. Are the works of Nezami and Dante similar? With that, I will hand it over to Professor Talattof.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ellison. Thank you, Dr. Azaz, for inviting. Thank you all for coming late afternoon, right the day before a long weekend. I don't know, that the credit must go to this combination of Nezami and Dante, bringing so many people, and also a number of people on Zoom. So in my work on Nezami Ganjavi, I have analyzed his poems for several reasons. In demystifying the mystic, that means I've been proving that he wasn't a Sufi or a pious religious man, which is held by most scholars of Nezami, and if not all. Was it only the result of my work on Nezami, which began with figuring out what his technique was. What is it that made Nezami so great, so appealing, and so influential in the entire Persian world? Now, in that regard, I just passingly made references to non-Persian poets, such as Shakespeare and others, but otherwise I compared his work in each of the chapters basically to the other I need to change the
This one.
this slide.
Yeah.
To this one.
Oh.
This one is one.
I think
Oh, I got it.
So the comparing Nezami's work to Dante's, in that sense, an exception. And the reason for that is because recently the Divine Comedy has also been used as another analytical tools for many of the scholars to prove Nezami's religiosity. I thought that if these scholars had used the story of Mahan to prove Nezami's religiosity and tendencies towards Sufism, that story would have been the best for them. However, unfortunately, none has used them, so I started with that. The most challenging story of Nezami Ganjavi. So I'm going to take a close look at this story and see whether it lends itself to a mystic interpretation, religious interpretation, or not. So Nezami Ganjavi and Dante share unique creative imagination and eloquence. Even though they lived in different era and diverse cultural setting, their literary works have a few thematic similarities, including their interest in religious symbolism and love poetry. They also share the ability to produce captivating images and tales. For example, Dante's enduring literary portrayals of the angelic and demonic characters in his Divine Comedy shares some of the fictional and fantastical qualities of Nezami's stories in his Seven Beauties. Moreover, in terms of form, they both make use of heavy allegory in the constructions of their literary work. Beyond these surface similarities, their works are profoundly different in their literary message and allegorical meanings and form. Dante provides a devoted portrayal of Beatrice and his love for her, while Nezami writes sweet poems praising his female characters, like Shirin and Lady. In my previous analysis of Nezami's love poetry, I demonstrated that he depicts various forms of love, carnal and spiritual, divine and profane, fruitful and unfulfilled, lyrical and lustful, based on attraction or obsession, fleeting passion and lasting infatuation, as seen in Half-Baked and his other romances. Interpreting Nezami's works solely as Sufi expressions of divine love neglects the breadth of his exploration of human emotions, sensibility, and his creative imagination. For Dante, love personified in purgatory and hell ultimately represented the divine concept related to God, embodied in Beatrice. Virgils in Dante's work clarifies that the key principle of love are whom to love and how much, with love for God being unmistakable. The natural is always without error, but mental love may choose an evil object or other through too much or too little vigor. The most vital area of comparison between their literary endeavors is their ability to construct colorful allegories. Both Dante and Nezami use natural and supernatural motifs in their portrayal of their allegorical constructs. For example, Dante fantasizes a forest where he's lost, the place where he encounters Beatrice, and where Beatrice sounds Virgil. In his use of natural or supernatural elements, Nezami often illustrates Persian gardens, prairies, and mountains, as well as the imagined connections of the stars with human life. Dante travels through 9 layers of hell. Nezami takes the readers through 9 levels of skies. Dante comes out of the valley of disappointment to convey the hopeful message of salvation through Catholicism. Nezami takes his characters through tragedies to convey the redeeming quality of reason. However, Dante's Divine Comedy is a vast allegory that offers commentary on religion, politics, love, differing fundamentally from Nezamian allegories. I conceptualize Nezamian Pictorial Allegory as a short, structured, interconnected passage with a surface story using scientific, religious, and natural descriptions to introduce a deeper narrative focused on his characters or events. Let us take a closer look at the story of Mahan from Half-Day Cap. On Wednesday of Mercury, Bahram Gur goes to Turquoise Castle and asks Princess Azargun of Maghreb to tell him a central story. Dressed in turquoise, she tells the story of Mahan, which contemporary readers might or might not find to be central. The story follows Mahan, a young Egyptian man who, after a strange and supernatural journey involving treasure, demons, and witches, returns home to find his friends in mourning. Scholars who believe Nezami was a Sufi writer should, in fact, invest time in Mahan's story because it lends itself to such reading better than Nezami's other stories. Yet, even if Nezami meant the story of Mahan to represent a Sufi philosophy, I would still argue that the message is not strong and that such a quality is only part of a creative process. Let us look at Mahan's adventures to see how they can be perceived as episodes of the degree of kharad or reason and not necessarily Sufi stages. Episode 1. One summer night, Mahan Hushyar, a young man, attends a party in a nobleman's garden. After a few hours of wine, delicious food, and other pleasures, he decides to take a walk. مغز ماهان چو گرم شد ز شراب تابش ماه دید و گردش آب گردان با گشت چون مستان تا رسید از چمن به نخلستان. Half drunk and happy, Mahan encounters his friend and business partner, Haida, who offers him a share of his wonderful and newly found treasure if only Mahan follows him. Although Mahan feels he is straying off the track and becoming lost, he continues to trust his friend. His sense of time and place growing increasingly unclear. While a Sufi interpretation might highlight the ill effects of greed, Nezami often glamorizes wealth. A more likely reading of this episode, found throughout Nezami's work, is the theme of misjudgment versus reason and rationalism, or kharad. A concept rooted in the pre-Islamic Zoroastrian era. Mahan's excessive drinking leaves him tipsy and impairs his judgment. Episode 2. As Mahan follows his friend, he begins to doubt his own perception. The next day, he finds himself tired, dehydrated, and with so-called friend nowhere to be seen. He rests at the entrance of a cave. In his languor, he encounters a couple who tell him that the man who seemed to be his friend was actually Hayel, one of the deceptive ghouls and thieves of the desert. Ghouls and thieves, used interchangeably, are demonic creatures that can take human forms to destroy people. Wicked spirits have a long history in Zoroastrian struggle against evil forces. The Zoroastrian Book of Vendida, written in the Avestan language, is a legal text containing laws against thieves. In the latter part of the mythical stories of the Shahnameh, thieves and demons represent human wickedness, a common theme in various traditions. And Mahan is actually violating all those rules. However, Mahan's lack of good judgment is profound, and he also misjudges the couple, who eventually turn out to be thieves as well. Episode 3. Mahan finds himself alone in a ditch at the next dawn. He gets out and walks until evening, when he sees a horseman who also hears from Mahan his strange experiences and miseries. The horseman says that couple was hired and Gedar, the thieves of evil doing. Still, you're lucky because they run away at dawn with the songs of roosters. Again, the rooster is perhaps a reference to Surush, the Zoroastrian angel who appears in this story as his at the end of as I believe as Mahan's subconscious. The horseman offers him his extra horse to Mahan, who fails to ask himself why a rider in the middle of nowhere is giving a horse. Once more, he misjudges the man and the situation. Episode 4. After passing a mountain, he arrives in a flat field and in delirious again. He feels he is in a desert of terror, where he hears uncanny, delusive noises, and he sees thousands of dark, shadowy, devilish creatures who look like a combination of cows and elephants, having horns and trunks. He realizes that the horse is a disguised, seven-headed, four-legged, winged dragon from hell. He must battle this creature all day and night in utter fear in order to escape it. Here, the poet's language makes the reader ask, did he imagine all those in a state of delirium and dehydration? Was this episode a part of a longer drunken dream that started with his departure from the party in the garden? That's my question. Episode 5, the following day, Mahan finds himself past the desert, but rubbing his eyes, he sees another stretch of desert, hot as hell, and blood color, terrifying and seemingly with poisonous air. His response is to run, like smoke, doomed. All day, so at night he gets out of that hell. Episode 6. Mahan continues on his way until he arrives at the vast deep shaft as a well system where he takes a nap. Nezami does not mention purgatory or barzakh anywhere. However, in this place in the well functions as a place between the hellish, demon-infested desert and an Aram paradise on the other side. Mahan carves his way out of the well into a fruit garden with tall, productive, voluminous trees of pistachios, apples, pomegranates, peach, banana, dates, pears, yuzu fruits, figs, almond, orange, grapes, and bushes of honeydew. As he begins to indulge, an older man shows up and scolds him for taking the fruits. However, he forgives Mahan very soon after hearing his story and explanations. Here, Nezami inserts his usual dichotomized constructs, which includes the rare occurrence of hell and paradise duality. تا که انگور کج نهاد کلاه دیده در حکم خود سپید و سیاه زاب انگور نار آتش کن همچو انگور بسته محضر خون میوه بر میوه سیب و سنجت و نار چون تبر خون ولی تبر زبوار چون که ما همچنان بهشتی یافت دل ز سوزخ سرای دوشین تافت. Then he follows with another set of dichotomy to indicate a possible shift. تیرگی را ز روشنی است که در سیاهی سپید شاید دید. This line refers to the previous shift in his unwanted journey when a hole and array of light gives him hope at the bottom of the well, encouraging him to dig through the rocks to get to the garden, another magical moment. The wealthy man, too, explains that those deceitful people are foolish and crooked, just like the thieves. He offers to adopt him as his son, share his wealth, and find him a beautiful bride. He then takes Mahan to a place by a sandal tree in a paradise-like garden. He instructs him to climb a ladder to stay there the entire night and not come down under any circumstances. This is Mahan's chance to reflect on events so far. But will he, if tested? In a myth, we don't focus on logic and rationality. Instead, we turn inward for answers. Yet Nezami insists on thinking, perhaps allowing King Bahram of the frame story to reflect. Enjoying the lofty comfort of the seat and the delight of the food, Mahan begins to relax in the amber ambience of the moon. The night arrives and Mahan sees 17 beautiful princes picnicking, partying, drinking wine, playing music, and singing seductive songs down below the tree. As if this is not enough to seduce Mahan, a gentle wind blows and reveals the citron-like breasts of those elegant, enthralling, enticing girls from under their white linen garments. By the way, these are Nezami's words, not mine. The princess eventually invites Mahan to join. And you guessed it, Mahan does not hesitate. He joins them and makes love to one of them who seems to be leading the group. The natural metaphors depicting the garden, sandal trees, various fruits, and wine reappear in this section to introduce the sensual sense of lovemaking. Terms like just stick, sources of pure wine, ruby seal, agate, and carnelian symbolize the lover's sex organ and intercourse. While this may have teased King Bahram's desire for an erotic tale, the story takes another turn. To his chagrin, the scene ends abruptly when Mahan realizes he has been deceived. The beautiful girl is actually a witch, reminiscence of the siren in Dante's tale. Mahan stops and she rebukes him, questioning why he desired her only in her attractive form. Here, however, there is no condemnation of sexual desire. The enigma lies in the object of that desire. Nezami vividly portrays beautiful princes and their entourage elsewhere, describing lips, necks, bodies, breasts, and sexual organs. These portrayals, which become central to Romance writing, were often associated with monarchs and royal courts inspired by ancient history. Once again, Mahan's judgment fails. He overlooks the garden's condition, forgetting why he is at the top of a tree and not questioning the sudden presence of so many pretty girls, biblical archetype to illustrate the desired consequences of failing to recognize the pattern of irrational behavior in demons, ghouls, and ignorant people? In the morning, Mahan opens his eyes to find himself in another nightmarish place, a hell filled with corpses, rotten bones, strange creatures, and filth. The paradise of the previous night has vanished. Episode 7. Mahan has no more excuses. Mustn't he change now? He produces a primal scream, a scream you hear when, quote, women give birth to a child, and, unquote, and he moves away as far as he can until he arrives at the sight of a clear water source. He questions his perceptions, this time seriously. He washes up, repents, and asks God for forgiveness. The mythical, immortal, green-clothed Hez appeared to him to take his hand. Hez tells him, because of your good intentions, I will help you go back home. However, this prophetic Hez does not give Mahan any specific advice or guidance. Doesn't do anything. Mahan only vows to avoid vice and wrongdoing, echoing a Zoroastrian principle. Upon that pledge, he suddenly finds himself in his town where his friends are sitting sad and dressed in azure. He too dresses in azure, and he launches into tales of his adventures. The remaining verses are about the color blue, as in the shades of azure blue or turquoise blue, to find the story's way back to pavilion with King Bahram, who, having heard the story, for some reason is excited and sleeps with Lazargun, the marigold. Clearly, a myth often has an ideological quality. Still, this reading shows that Nezami has manipulated whatever the original Alexandrian story had been to shed light on a recurring message. According to him, there is nothing wrong with wealth, talking to a couple, accepting horse, and having sex. However, these are among the fertile areas in which one's reasons can be tested. The story might be seen as an allegory, starting with the descriptions of the colors and stars to set the mood for fantasy. However, each one of the above episodes, and indeed many of the stanzas, also have the characteristics of a pictorial allegory. In his allegories, the first story uses colors, sounds, and descriptions of land before describing the details of events or conditions of character. The episodes in Paradise Fruit Garden begins with the descriptions of a list of fruits. However, those descriptions foretell the next event, which involves the deceptively beautiful women, wine and sex. Hulu, peach, connotes the cheek of a beautiful woman, or a lover's kiss. Juju fruits refers to color of lips of a mistress. Shemshad, boxwood, always indicates the tall, elegant figure of a lover. Pistachio refers to women's sex organ. And anod pomegranate in Nezami's poetry is rarely anything but woman's breast. The words of angur, grape juice, always mean wine. Perhaps writing about such an assortment of a voluptuous description to a king could have had the desired effect for him. Still, the lines containing them are part of the pictures, which includes the spicy party with 17 girls. The trials and the travail of the story of Mahan are about the difficulty of overcoming the common human flaws, the most consequential of which is naivete, catalyzed by 3 deceiving thieves and demons. Ches, in the end, might be a Nezamian metaphor for self-awareness, which he sees necessary for the achievement, finally, of good judgment, reason. As Patrick Frank notices in the story of Khosrow and Shirin, Nezami relates that one day when he came to Seljuk Torol King Shah III, the ruler dismisses his cupbearers and musicians, saying, since now Hez has come, referring to Nezami, we should turn away from wine in order to gain the water of life from Hez, from him, from Nezami. Frank offers a perceptive interpretation of the scene. He writes, in this self-presentation, Hez links his appreciation with the mental change of the hero. He has come in his usual function as helper for those in distress, but also as the personification of the hero's good intention. I should add that in this story, Ches is also remotely linked to the Zoroastrian figure Surush, an angelic being known for his banishing demons and appearing in various forms in Persian mythology. This is why he appears to Mahan like an apparition that somewhat resembles Mahan as well, indicating a transformative moment in which Mahan realizes a level of self-consciousness. Thus, his last name, Hoshyar, observant. Therefore, if one can see a connection between the story of Mahan and Sufi ideology, one can easily think of other possibilities and other possible connections just as easily. The story is told by the 7 princes address Bahram directly or indirectly. Each of them targets a flaw in the king and tries to correct him by showing how the protagonists in the stories dealt with similar problems. In such portrayals, Nezami could have naturally been inspired by Zoroastrian and pre-Islamic concepts, just like Ferdowsi was in his Book of Kings. In fact, Mahan is reminiscent of a name in the book of Zoroastrian judicial and moral code entitled Matigan Hezare Datsitan, Book of Thousands Judgment. That book, or knowledge of it, as well as the book of Minuye Kharad, the spirit of reason or heavenly wisdom, could have been the sources of inspiration for Nezami. Given this possibility, we might notice that the key concept aimed at flawed humanity, common in all 7 episodes, is misperceptions and misjudgment. Given this possibility, it is not reasonable to read this story as the description of a disciple going through 7 stages of Sufism. Beyond this contrast, both Dante and Nezami incorporate imagery of hell and paradise in their allegorical works, although Dante does so more elaborately. We could still ask if they had access to similar sources. For instance, were both authors familiar with the Sasanian text, Arda Virav, or Arda Vira's Name, written in Middle Persian and later available in Arabic and Persian translations. This text narrates the dream journey of a pious Zoroastrian into ether world, sent to verify Zoroastrian beliefs about the invisible world and the efficacy of Zoroastrian rituals. The narrative, likely finalized during the early Islamic period, shares similarities with Divine Comedy. Both depict hell, purgatory, paradise, a woman symbolizing faith, and an ascension episode. Either way, this contrast can help us view Nezami's works beyond their religious references, focusing on the aesthetics of their poetry. In the story of Mahan, Nezami creates vivid allegories. As the sun travels to the west, Mahan moves across the feast side, admired like a prom king. After a lavish meal and red wine at dawn, the moon shifts. The Nile and its banks darken, silver twilights. The twilight gradually diminishes. The vibrancy, songs and laughter, creating a divide between Mahan and his admirers. Moreover, dissimilar to Dante's work, Nezami's portrayal of love is often comprehensive, diverse, and often central. In terms of piety and advocacy too, while Dante focuses on religion and social issues, Nezami's message is more about reason and rationality. This chart summarizes their differences and different substances and forms resulting in their distinct allegory. How these elements are used in each of these poets' works to arrive in allegory, and finally, as you can see, as I explained, the allegories are also fundamentally different. In brief, Dante changes the Italian literary language and helps to shape people's imagination of hell and paradise. He helped the Bible. Nezami helped the genre by influencing the Persianate world's poetry. He used religious references the same way he used other sources. Thus, the purpose of this comparison is not merely to highlight the differences between these two significant poets. Like other comparative analysis in the book, it aims to show that Nezami was focused on constructing what I call Nezamian Pictorial Allegories rather than promoting religion. By examining the concept of kharab in his work, we might even reconsider the modern notion that medieval mind believed human reason alone could not lead to salvation. This belief is in the necessity of divine intervention or guidance by a wise man is strong in Sufi discourse and is echoed in contemporary fundamentalist religiosity. Nezami's poetry diverges from the characteristics of Sufi poetry and pious religiosity in that regard, but also due to the diverse themes, unique style, vivid allegories, and also because it lacks the homoerotic tales and allegorical love for a young man that were common in Sufi poetry. That's it. Thank you.
thank you to Talattof for an interesting comparison between Dante and Nezami. Found it interesting. We have around 15 minutes for questions, and Julie and I will alternate between Zoom and between in person in the room. Yes, see? Go ahead.
So thanks very much for this thought-provoking comparison. So in regard to the issue that you raised as to the relation between Nezami's representation and Sufi thematics, it seems so. One very kind of obvious way of understanding many of the stories in Hafpeikar is that, as a struggle of the character with his, lusts, desires. And I think that's the way many people took these stories, in the past, that
this particular story, right, Mahan? Or
not just this story. I mean, there are other ones
yes.
in Hafpeikar also, in
You're
which
right.
the main character, like, there's the temptation, usually sexual, and then
Yes.
they give in to the temptation, and it has bad consequences.
Yes.
And it's very easy, especially in that, cultural setting, to take that as a struggle against the self, the nafs, and failing to overcome the self, and then you have the negative consequences. But when finally, he decides not to give in to the self at the end, and Khizr comes, then, so the point I'm making is that he must have known that for the reader, this would be the obvious kind of interpretation. Or his reader, people who lived in that time, there's so many stories of this nature, right? So, do you feel that he was setting it up this way, but it actually has a different meaning? Or is this just, why did he set it up so that ordinary readers might immediately have that interpretation?
Yeah, well, that's a very great question. I studied with one of Paul Damon's students, Tim Botti at the University of Michigan, who always quoted Paul Damon saying that it's almost impossible to get to the author's intention. So, however, Nezami is perhaps an exception because he makes his intentions clear elsewhere throughout his enormous set of poems. The five major, indeed 6 major books. He says clearly that he's concerned with literature, and he uses a word. The word that he uses for literature is sahon, which nowadays we translate as talk, speech, or maybe parole. But and he actually thinks that his sahon is on par with Quran. Very, very clearly he says that. Now, the thing is that he never, even in this story, or as you said in other stories of Hafpeikar, Seven Beauties, particularly the one in the Red Pavilion about Turandot, which became Puccini's masterpiece opera, and so on and so forth. These two, that one has been interpreted vastly as a Sufi representation, and I argued that if you want to use one of the stories, this is better for you, but it won't work because he doesn't really talk about, he doesn't see the desires as unnatural. He's just the misperceptions. You know, the guy doesn't go through the reasoning. I don't know why I don't know exactly why until around the end of the 10th, 11th, 12th century, a lot of the poets and thinkers and writers and scientists were still obsessed with the concept of khayal, which is only through the Zoroastrianism and pre-Islamic Persian culture, you know, coming through them. No other sources. They had no other sources. And then I was amazed for my research to come up with so many books of that era, written in Pahlavi languages, written in Old Persian, you know, concepts of khayal, reasons, even on the writing on the rocks. The kings back then referred to this, to reasoning and khayal. So,
didn't they also refer to like Greek philosophy with that term? Like the book Javidan Kharad, it's about Greek philosophy.
I think that there is the translations of Greek sources may have contributed to this infatuation. However, in my reading of Divine Comedy, the work is not that much concerned with that notion because of that medieval mentality that the salvation is beyond, you know, reaching salvation cannot be achieved by human. Although in his life, Dante was very practical in his life in Florence, in, you know, his political approach, his tacit advocacy of separation of church and state, you know, followed that concept, but it's not that much a theme in his work. So I answer your question by saying that, you know, you could read it anyway. I mean, the first time I read Nezami was the story of Turandot, and the interpretation was that this guy wanted to marry this princess on the top of the mountain, couldn't, so he went and consulted with a Sufi peer or Morshed leader, and then came back and he conquered this. The problem is that man went to probably 10 different schools, you know, to learn all the skills he needed to go there, not just a mental or a logical approach to these 7 stages.
Thank you, Kamran. We have a question from Zoom.
This question comes from Eric Taylor, who's a MENAS MA. I'm curious what part of Seven Beauties Professor Talattof found the most compelling and what was problematic.
7 what?
I'll slow down.
Have
I'm curious
Pekka.
what
Oh,
part
Seven
have
Beauties.
Pekka
Was problematic.
The most compelling.
found the most compelling and what was problematic.
What part of, well, I believe all of them are compelling. These are one beautiful story after another. But of course, the story of Turandot, or the princess from China, because these 7 princes come from different territories. You know, like this one that I read here, the story of Mahan, is princess from Maghreb. But although they all have Persian names as well. But the Turandot is the most dramatic version. There is a story of the good versus bad, which is also a little bit fantastical. It happens, or you know, in the desert. The entire story goes on in the, and that is. It maybe also leads itself to different interpretations, but eventually, ultimately, in my opinion, is also about misjudgment and lack of understanding of the real issues. Ganjavi.
Whether a Nezami was a pious Sufi or not is of course debatable. But can we not conclude that in his cultural milieu, Sufism was the language of poetics or adab?
Sufi?
Yeah.
Sufism?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's the presentation. I hope it's not debatable anymore that he was a Sufi, But I don't know. There is this, you're familiar with the works of Tasker and Renaissance, who's who of the medieval period. That is this gentleman named Ofi. He has made a lot of outrageous claims about other poets, about literature, about Persian culture. And one of the things that he said, without any references, without having heard this terminology associated with Nezami before, all of a sudden he wrote about Nezami, the Sufi, and the great Sufi and pious man. And then somehow that picked up. Everyone who started to write about Nezami started with this great pious poet, And then the Islamic Revolution occurred in 1979 in Iran, and we have to be really frank here. Usually, often, social discourses influence perceptions of researchers or commentators. Or maybe it's the way they want to, get tenure on those campuses. I don't know. I don't know why it just keeps going on and on and on and on. I've names almost all the prominent scholars who believe that he was either a Sufi or a pious man, and someone called him Ayatollah. And this is mind-boggling. And whether all this goes back to Ofi or not, that also is not clear to me. But the state discourse, the state ideology certainly has played a role in the rise of that kind of interpretation. And then the classical Persian literature is really an ocean of literary works. I haven't touched, even one drop of it. It has all these trends, all sorts of X-rated poetry. It has secular poetry, anti-religious poetry. It has pro-religion poetry. In the Safavid period, everybody was writing about in praise of Shiism. So it changes, but there are always all sorts of poetry. Now, Nezami, it's really not very easy to prove that his works, particularly in 12th century, was part of that Sufi language of classical Persian literature, that it itself was only a small part of this body of work.
Thank you, Kamran.
One more question online.
I have one from the room, which
Sure.
says,
Okay.
well, I think, if I know, many lines of comparison were established between Allegory, right, the Epistle of Forgiveness, the Senator of Ram, and Dante, the Divine Account. Can you find any similarities now between Allegory and the Epistle of Forgiveness and between Nezami?
Well, I'm not an authority to comment on that word.
Because the claim has been all the time that Al-Elahé by Dante was mostly impacted by Allegory, right? By
Some
Senator
people
of Ram.
claim that.
Some people claim that.
Egyptians.
Yeah. Well, I was very careful, even though the plots are so similar. I just posed the question. I'm not claiming that Dante has read the Pahlavi sources. It's very unlikely, even though it could have been translated back then. And then also, the reality is that a lot of these myths had been circulated for centuries before them, and perhaps existed in all different traditions, So, they come up with their own versions.
Maybe one more question from Zoom?
Yes. From Casey Eaglesizer, a difficult aspect of comparative literature is finding what is interesting about the comparison and what each work brings out in the other. I know you, Professor Talattof, have studied Nezami for a very long time, but how did you find Dante as a salient comparative partner for Nezami?
Yeah, in 2021, they asked me to give a keynote speech in a conference in the Republic of Azerbaijan, Baku. So, and when I accepted, and when I read and the conference was, I kid you not, the similarities of Nezami and Dante. If you Google the words Baku, Nezami, Dante, it'll come up. There's a video of it. There are a list of presenters. So, when I wrote my presentation and I was ready, to deliver it in a couple of days, I just happened to read the rest of the abstracts. I think there were maybe 30 or 40 abstracts, and they all were talking about how similar they are. And then I got scared, because as a first person, going there and talk about Nezami, that they're not similar, and then what are they going to do for the rest of the conference? So I kind of toned it down a little bit, and I posed a lot of questions, it went on. But that also inspired me to search further, and I saw that it has been a trend in Italian, Romanian, and in Iran as well. That as if there wasn't enough to compare Nezami with the Holy Book of Islam, with Islamic sources, with the Book of Mi'raj, Ascensions, and so on and so forth. Now they found Dante to further prove his religiosity. So that is how I studied it, and that's the only exceptions in the book, that comparing it with Dante. Otherwise, in each chapter, I compare Nezami's work with at least one, and sometimes two or three other giants of classical Persian poetry to prove my points. It's not only the story of Mahan. Each one of them, his major books, Leilyan, Majnun, Khosrow, and Shirin, many stories from Half Peykar, they simply do not lead themselves to this. In each of those stories, there are themes. In Leilyan, Majnun, it's just a love. And it's a tale that existed, but he just beautifies it, he promotes it, he makes it bestseller in the entire Persian world. And why he does that? Because he really, really offers a beautiful understanding of what love is. If anything, that's where I say that lends itself, can lead itself to a comparison with Shakespeare's work there. So at least let us agree that if we do not impose one ideological lens on readings Nezami's work, we can see other possibilities. And that is how I notice his amazing ability in writing this unique type of allegories.
I have a personal question. I'm curious because the choice of the color and the story turquoise, I know the associations of turquoise with a lot of the architecture and the mosque domes in Iran and Isfahan, but I'm just curious if you could comment on some of the symbolism that's commonly associated with turquoise.
Yes. So, see, this is another another great aspects of Nezami's work that can be overlooked if we just focus on religiosity. And that is that each of these pavilions, each of these castles that the king constructs for these 7 princes, and on each day of the week goes to one of them. So each castle has a particular color. But this color is also associated with a lot of astronomy. You know, the shapes of the stars, the connection between the stars and the human feelings, and the human feelings with the month. He plays for pages after pages with just the shape of the stars. You know, these scorpion you know, in a way that you feel that you're there. You're just seeing these things. You know, he has versified the story of Ascension in all of his 5 books. And now, it's so easy to say that, okay, because he wrote about Ascension, therefore he's a pious person because he believes in the Ascension. But that prevents us from seeing why he has brought all those colors, all the journeys, all the shapes, constellations, into this journey. You know, and which, in my opinion, at the end, he's just showing off his ability to work with one little piece of information, the Ascension, because, you know, there is not much said or written about Ascension itself, right? There are a lot of debates about it, but the story itself is very short, even in Moran, right? In 2 places maybe just referred to. But he goes on and on and on, lines after lines, pages after page, are portraying these sceneries. So what is his purpose? His purpose is to show, look what I can do, in my opinion.
I know it's 10 minutes after 4. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Before we go, we have some refreshments. We have some coffee for you and also some cookies. We'd like to thank the co-sponsors.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Can we listen to thank the
Yeah.
co-sponsors?
We would like to thank the School of Middle East and North African Studies, Ben and Scott. Also would like to thank Hussein, for interim director for the School of Global Studies, and also for Kamran and Roshan for making this happen. Thank you.